Carolina will host Clemson in the rivalry hoops match of the year before the break gets here and the new year and all that stuff. Trying to get a Palmetto Series point, et cetera, et cetera. But it is Carolina, it is Clemson, it is basketball. Derek Scott will be calling it tonight. Airtime 6:30. They'll tip off just a shade after 7 p.m. And the Gamecocks look to win their 5th straight. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that stuff, Derek. But glad to have you and can't wait to listen to you tonight, my man.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Rocking the quarter zip in honor of LP today. I appreciate that. He's ready to go.
Of course. Yeah.
He's a big Q zipper. He's a Q zip guy.
Ever since I was so flattered when we had the last time we had Coach Paris on, Derek, he said this was his favorite one. So I chose the right one.
You did.
Derek joins us in between his Christmas shopping gifts, whatever you're doing to get all your gifts. I don't know if you order online or if you go to the actual store anymore.
Both. I'm not a great online shopper. I have not completely committed to that. So I still have a lot to get done, sad to say.
Well, you've been a busy guy. State championships were just played, and you're the voice of the basketball team. There's only one Derek Scott. As they said, there's only one Jonathan. Jonathan Moxon is only one man. You remember that from Varsity Blues. So there's only one Derek Scott. But we are sure glad you're on our team. That's for dang sure. Derek, tonight Carolina looks to get their second win over Clemson at home in the Lamont Paris era. It was Chico Carter in a last-second shot. I think it was 0.9 seconds left on the clock when he hit it to give them a 60-58 victory just a couple of years ago. Tigers are good. They're coming in off of a heartbreak against Memphis. They lost in OT 87-82. But our Gamecocks are on a 4-game winning streak here, Derek. So tell us about that. What's been going on the last couple of weeks that's led to the success?
Well, you've seen improved three-point shooting. I think that's a big part of it. You've seen improved defense. I think Lamont could probably put his finger on that better than I can in terms of the specifics of what has led to a better overall defensive effort, but there's no question they've improved at that end of the court as well. And then there is, I think, just the evolution of the team in terms of everybody figuring out roles and getting comfortable with each other and understanding what is being asked of them. Maybe better than they did, right out of the chute, which is, that's not surprising, kind of comes with the territory. When you start a season, there are lots of folks who on their own individual time worked out hard with, thoughts of what they want to be. And then sometimes it doesn't materialize that way when the season begins and you have to adapt. And so I think some of that took place and you've just seen them, really playing at a better clip here. Really going back to that game against Virginia Tech a couple of weeks back when we were down in Florida.
All right, so part of that is Jamarii Thomas. In his first 3 games in a Carolina uniform, he had 10 turnovers. In the 7 games since, he's had 10 turnovers. So he certainly cleaned that up. Derek, what have you seen from that young man?
Just getting, I guess, more comfortable as well. And his defense is a big part of the improvement on the team defense. His on the ball efforts out front have been really, really huge. And he's made a lot more threes too. All those things I talked about that where the team's improved, a lot of that's because he's improved. And as you mentioned, the turnovers are down, the 3-point shooting is up, decision-making is better, and then maybe evolving into more of a leadership role, a little more vocal, which comes with being, the lead guard on a team. That really doesn't have, Jacoby is a leader, but not a real vocal guy. And I don't really feel like Collin is all that vocal. So somebody really needs to kind of step up and be that way with this team. You never had any questions last year about that because Michi was a very vocal guy and the sort of guy that, was wanted to be out in front. And if you think about it, you don't necessarily see that personality with this team necessarily. Your statistics might put you out in front, but as far as your interest in, being that face of a team, I don't know that this bunch has somebody that's obviously that person. But Jamarii certainly has as much chance of doing it as anybody. He's older. He's had success as an individual on a couple different levels. And as I said, the ball's in his hands enough that to some degree it just happens that way.
They've been getting the ball to Nick Pringle as well. The last couple of games for him have been really good. 38 total points, 13 of 18 from the floor, Derek, and 12 of 13 from the charity strike.
Yeah.
And that's been very important in this little run as well.
Yeah, his free throw rate from the beginning of the season was very high. He gets to the line a bunch, but that's only a positive if you make the free throws. And he started off 5 of 13, I think. And since then has been just not just good, but really good. And so that's been key. The guy, anybody in his role, it's usually going to come down to how many minutes can you keep them on the court? How much is foul trouble going to impact your rotation? How much is just endurance going to impact the big guys? And so it's, I think, really pivotal for this team to succeed against quality opponents that he's able to play. I'd like to think 30 minutes a night if possible. They've gotten away the last few games. They've won in spite of a couple opportunities. There are a couple instances where it didn't happen that way, but they went to smaller lineups and had success with that. I don't know that you'll be able to do that against Clemson because, Victor Locken is a 6'11", 245 and an old guy. And, of course, Shefflin has become one of the best rebounders in the country. So if they're both out there together, hard for me to imagine how you can survive for long periods of time without both Collin and Nick on the court.
All right, you mentioned rebound. How would you describe Carolina right now on the boards?
Okay. Not as good as at times they need to be, and at times fine, but they're not a dominant rebounding team. And, that's if they're going to be, it probably will have to be a team rebounding effort. You're probably going to have 5 guys commit to go into the glass because Collin gets his, but you can't just expect him to get everything. So I think that's an area they definitely need some improvement in. And you're playing a team tonight that can hurt you there. You think about Clemson offensively, they don't have anybody that just blows you away as an individual scorer. If you think about it, if Chase Hunter is your top scorer on that team, but yet he's not a shooter that just strikes fear in your heart, then that tells you right there they don't have that guy necessarily. They might have somebody get hot here and there, and they've certainly won enough this year to tell you they're doing things the right way offensively, but there's no one guy that scares you. So I think they're probably a team that's going to rely on offensive rebounding a fair amount. And so that's going to be a factor certainly tonight. They play Chauncey Wiggins a bunch of minutes, but he's 6'10" and wants to shoot threes. He's a little bit, like from South Carolina's standpoint, Jordan Butler. He's not out there to try and, really spend a lot of time in the paint in spite of being the tallest guy on the floor a lot when he's out there.
Collin Murray-Boyles has 3 consecutive double-doubles. I have not done my homework. Derek, is he chasing any records or anything right now with that you're aware of? Okay.
He is. I've not been made aware of it either. Yeah.
Okay.
That's not research I'm going to be able to do. So somebody's going to have to tell me if that's the case.
Where's Mike Debate when we need him?
Yeah, I have not heard anything about that as far as a streak of double doubles, but that's JB, that's a very legitimate question to ask. And I will pass that question along and see if anybody can, come up with any answers to that. As far as when the last time somebody had more than 3 in a row was.
I know he was a baseball guy, but where's Tommy Moody when you need him? He spits this stuff out,
Exactly.
Okay. Collin does lead the SEC in field goal percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in the top 20 in the country. I do know that. I did not do that research. That is from Michael Debates in his release yesterday in our email. So you mentioned the guys up front for Clemson, the experience they have, and they are talented, but they've certainly been around. They have seen Collin already last year.
But have they? Because he was straight out of the mono break then. He played in that game, but he was nowhere close to what he became in the new year last year, and what he is now. So I don't know that you can really say they have, I don't take that game as a one that's worthy of evaluating how he did against them, because he was, if that wasn't his first game back, it was close to it. So.
Yeah, it's such a tremendous point, because I'm anxious to see how they'll defend South Carolina tonight. Last game, what were the Gamecocks? 5 of 19 from long range, but prior to that, they were above 50% in consecutive ball games.
Yeah.
So you wonder how much focus they're going to put on that front court tonight with Collin and the success he's had thus far throughout the season, not just the last 3 games. And what will that do for guys like Jamarii and Zach and Jacoby and Myles when he's in there? Can they knock him down? I think that's really one of the questions that this whole sucker boils down to.
Yeah, no question. And as we mentioned Locken earlier, he's a new face. He transferred in from Cincinnati, but he's a pretty well-developed shot blocker. And so I'm curious to see how they go matchup-wise. Do they put Locken on Pringle, which would be the natural inclination, you would think, or do they put, instead of that, are they more focused on putting Shefflin on Pringle, as Nick's a less polished scorer? So even if he's got a little bit of a height advantage on Shefflin, it's not a huge one, and Shefflin's a 240-pound older guy. Do they just try and muscle him that way and ask Collin to score over Lachlan? I am very curious to see what Brad Brownell does in terms of those matchups.
Yeah, I absolutely am too. Derek, is there some, we've kind of mentioned the dudes who get the ball a lot thus far. Is there somebody who's maybe a little bit off the radar going into this game based on what you've seen through 10 games this year, understanding the Tigers and who they are, somebody that you've circled as far as a matchup goes, or somebody that maybe Clemson is going to have to game plan around that the rest of us aren't talking about?
Well, I keep coming back to the same person, and that is Myles Stute. It's just not come together for Myles. And we know, as someone who has produced in SEC competition for multiple years, that he can do that. And if he could get into rhythm early and hit some shots, that's a game changer for this team. You talk about a 3-point marksman. He's the one that has the track record more than anybody else to be able to do that. And it would absolutely, when you think about how we lost to them last year, the guy I mentioned earlier that doesn't typically play inside in spite of his height, Chauncey Wiggins, was a game changer for them. We did not think we'd have to worry that much about defending him on the perimeter, and he hit 3 threes in that game. And when they were struggling, and South Carolina, basically was riding Meechie Johnson last year up at Little John to what looked like it was headed towards a victory, Chauncey Wiggins really changed the direction of that game with some big shots for them, and then that got PJ Hall going. So I think you could look at Stute in a similar manner. If he can hit some shots in this contest, then that can really change the way you defend South Carolina and open up the space around the basket a little more for Collin to be able to do what he does.
Well, you mentioned Meechie. Well, Ohio State's going through it right now. Auburn took them to the woodshed and then some the other day. That's for sure.
Auburn's taking everyone to the woodshed.
Yeah.
Their Ken Palm numbers the other day, their efficiency rating compared to their opponents is higher at this point in the season than any team has ever been since Ken Palm started doing this thing.
What? Yeah. Really?
Nobody's been this good through this many games since Ken Palm started his system than Auburn has been this year. They are overwhelmingly impressive to this point.
Wow. And they did lose to Duke. Carolina, by the way, will host the Tigers on January 11th, but we got a ways to go.
Yeah.
But before we get there, I'm going to ask you a tongue-in-cheek question that's more difficult to answer than the one about how many consecutive double-doubles is the record at South Carolina. How the hell is Chase Hunter still at Clemson?
6 years, man.
Dude.
6 years.
I will say this, hat tip for a guy sticking around that long with one program in today's environment.
Yeah, kidding.
Major hat tip for that. You've been around a while.
Well, my buddy Andy Astley is a good friend of mine. Andy was on Frank's staff at South Carolina. He's on Brad's staff now as a head of operations. I texted him last night when they were on their trip down. I said, it's 6 years for Chase Hunter, right? It's not 5, because when you say 6 at one school, you're almost convinced you're wrong. And he said, yeah, it's 6. I said, tell me again how that worked.
Yeah.
And I'm digging through his bio, and it's, like anything else, freshman year, it's not as if he didn't play, and he's played 6 seasons. Now, his first season, there was an injury that cut it short. So he got a red shirt, but he had to have played just about as many games as you can legally play and still get a red shirt. And then his second year was a full year, but that was the, full year in COVID terms. That was that year after, we had the first year where the season got stopped and we didn't have an NCAA tournament, but everybody played a full year. Well, that was his red shirt year. That second year when we had an NCAA tournament, but it was when everybody was in a bubble, that was the year that he played the full year, but everybody who played that year got an additional year because we were convinced in that moment that we had done them all a disservice. And in hindsight, you roll your eyes at what that did to college athletics and giving all those guys extra years and taking the younger guys who were coming down the pike, really a disservice to them. But anyway, that's how he gets gotten to 6. And, the crazy thing is PJ Hall could have done the same thing this year. And PJ and Chase both considered pro ball. Chase came to the conclusion that whatever he was going to make in his likely landing spot, which would have probably been Europe, that he would potentially make more in NIL and, staying in Clemson. PJ decided, no, I'm going pro, and then he didn't get drafted. He just as easily have made that decision to stick around and been better for it. But he didn't, and I'm not disappointed in that right now.
No, I'm not either. That's all right. Go ahead. Yeah, Clemson might be the best team in the ACC. I don't know. I know if they played the SEC,
I think Duke's got everybody lapped on that one this year. And I'm not a Duke guy, but they're really good, and everybody else is pretty good and below. I think.
I think it's just wild, Derek, to even look at how it's changed, right? I mean, you think about this, and when all this started, the scheduling shifts in the SEC a few years back, et cetera, et cetera. This is the best league in the country, the Southeastern Conference.
Well, I mean, it was debatable to some last year, and this year nobody even my buddy Ryan, who's the Big 12's biggest flag waver, he's even kept his trap shut about it right now because you just can't make the argument right now on behalf of any other conference compared to SEC basketball, which is kind of like you just hard to imagine all the years we spent with basketball being the redheaded stepchild in this league. And to see it now where you've got 4 teams who no one would question whether they're a national championship contender and a bunch of others who are all right now NCAA tournament contenders. I mean, South Carolina needs this win tonight because we're the only team in the league that doesn't really have a non-conference quality win.
Yep.
You can put that into quad talk. You can speak of it in quad 1, quad 2. But the reality of it is, if you are going to, when you consider how loaded the league is and how many opportunities there will be to get quad 1 wins in conference play, if you do that, and at the end of the year, you're on the resume comparison wagon with other teams, it's eventually going to come down to what you do in non-con because you've all got strong conference play. And if you don't have a quad 1 win or even a quad 2 win, then that's going to be hard to make your argument against someone else who has done some things in non-conference play that stand up a little better. So that's why this one is pretty pivotal for South Carolina tonight if you are looking at it beyond just the rivalry and thinking about, okay, how can this impact this team, in the ultimate goal, which is to get back to the NCAA tournament for a second straight year.
100%. Mad Dog, he just made me feel very smart. I 100% agree with that. I mentioned that earlier, Derek, because Carolina right now does not have I mean, you can look at North Florida. That game is not going to matter at the end of the day because of the league schedule that they're going to play. But you had the opportunities against Indiana and Xavier, couldn't get them done. So you're missing a data point there, and then you're moving on to this. And I agree 100% with that, Derek. They're going to be compared to their peers because this league is going to get 11 or 12 teams into the dance. I'm convinced of that.
Absolutely. Because at this point, and this was the way it was in the Big 12 2 years ago, and that's why I say this. You get into conference play, and you can't go backwards because every game's a quad 1.
Right.
And so if you lose it, well, that you don't get nicked too bad for that. And if you win it, that's what you're looking for. You're going to have a steady diet of quad one opportunities from the beginning of January until the beginning of March. So there's nowhere really for you to backslide. Even if you go into a tough stretch, like, South Carolina playing Auburn and Alabama in back-to-back games at the beginning of conference play there, that doesn't really hurt you if you lose those games. It just doesn't help you. I mean, and it will help you immensely if you find a way to win games like that. So
I've never seen anything like this. When you look at the schedule, there is not one ball game, not one, that you look at and say, okay, well, this is or generally you can look at it, Derek, as you know, and you can identify a stretch here or there or two. Okay, well, they could probably get 2 of 3 or 3 or 4, however you want to look at it, right? None of that exists in the SEC for any of these teams this year.
The ironic thing is tonight, South Carolina does need that win, but you have all these great opportunities in conference play. Meanwhile, up the road in Charlotte, North Carolina desperately needs to beat Florida, because when they get into ACC play, they're not going to be able to help themselves much. Right. Other than 2 games with Duke and a game with Clemson, Tar Heels, what they've done to this point, they're going to pretty much, that's what they're going to have to speak of, because that league is so far down. So, yeah, it's ironic to see North Carolina in that kind of a desperate position almost in December, pre-Christmas, in a matchup on a neutral court with Florida. So, but that's exactly the way that matchup looks to me.
Yeah, and the Gators are the better basketball team. They're undefeated thus far. For those wondering,
haven't played a soul, but they've beaten the what out of everybody. So I'm curious to see how they match up tonight, but it certainly doesn't. It doesn't have major repercussions for them if they lose it, like it does for North Carolina.
100, yeah, absolutely. Carolina, by the way, for those that haven't checked, is 68 today in the Ken Palm, and them alongside LSU, unless I totally missed something this morning in my notes, are the only 2 in the net rankings that are outside of the top 60, I believe.
Yep.
So to Derek's point, every game in league play essentially is a quad 1 or a quad 2. They're all going to help you, and they're not really going to hurt you, but you're going to want to win them. Yeah. And then tonight's ball game is obviously going to go much into that. It's a 6:30 tip time, or a 7 o'clock tip time, 6:30 air time for Derek and Casey. But old Perry Clark's going to be on TV tonight calling it. Have you given him? Do you give him tips? You ever talk to Perry? Hey, look, man, you need to ease up on this.
Yeah, PC was involved with the group. I think he's a consultant with the group that puts on a lot of those tournaments. So he was in Fort Myers when we were down there.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time chatting up PC at practice and at the hotel and so forth. And he will not. PC's he's going to ask you. Tell me about this team. He's not going to assume he knows that much about it when he's not at practice every day. So yeah, PC's asked for some information, which I'm always hesitant to sound too confident when I'm talking to a coaching lifer like that, for fear that he might look at me and go, well, that's just not true. that's nonsense. You're an idiot.
Hey, there was no more calming presence I've ever seen on a bench than Perry Clark. Didn't matter what was going on the floor. He never changed.
Yeah.
He looked the same at all times. Couple keys to the game tonight in this rivalry matchup that you'll be focused on, especially probably early on, Derek.
Yeah, well, I do think rebounding is going to be big. You've got to limit their second chances when you've got a guy like Shefflin, who is just an animal on the glass, and a team that doesn't necessarily have elite athletes. Then that's going to be a huge factor for how they score. And then for South Carolina, I really feel like, in a strange way, what kind of community support are you getting here? The students are gone. Last year, Clemson came back and won that game in Clemson because that place was a sellout, and it was an awesome atmosphere. We are playing them, unfortunately, after the kids are off campus. And so what kind of rallying force will the community be to try and make sure that you do get a home court advantage? Because it can absolutely matter. When it's a game where Vegas says it's a point or a point and a half difference, you better believe home court's going to play a role. And South Carolina needs people to show up and have one last moment of pre-holiday cheer and just be the kind of person you think you typically are when it's Carolina and Clemson, and let it out, get it out of your system.
I tried to stay away from that conversation with you a little bit, because we did have some of it earlier. Because and I don't like throwing stones necessarily because I don't understand what goes into all the scheduling, and things of that nature. This isn't a shot at Coach Parrish or anybody, but it is really disappointing that this game. I mean, damn well football. I mean, although that it's played on Thanksgiving weekend, and I know students leave for Thanksgiving, et cetera, et cetera. If students weren't going to be there, they'd figure something else out for football. Right. They make it a point, but I wish that they could figure out something because this does fall too often, especially at South Carolina when students are not around. I was just there yesterday for graduation, and I was thinking to myself, there's more people in the gym tonight for graduation than there might be for the basketball game tomorrow. That's disappointing to me.
And the frustrating part is just, as I said, last year it didn't happen that way. We're at Clemson.
Right.
Semester's still going on. Place is just absolutely packed. Awesome atmosphere. It helped them. You'd almost like to be able to say, okay, we got to do these contracts in 2-year deals. Whatever we're doing for you guys, we're getting the same in return. We can't have it where one school gets that kind of an edge when they're at home and the other school doesn't. That's to me is kind of a deal breaker. And I don't know who. I'm not saying I'm pointing fingers at Clemson saying they made this happen this way. I don't know. I don't know how it comes about. Scheduling is an imperfect science, and there's so many cooks in the kitchen, whether it's TV playing a role or whether it's, the two schools having to match up what they've already got on their calendar. But yeah, it's a shame. It just shouldn't. This should not be a game that falls this close to Christmas. Just should not. So,
well, hopefully Carolina gets it done. They are now 2.5-point favorites. I guess the money's coming in on the Tigers tonight, but that's all right. Hopefully they can go get it done. 5-game winning streak, win the rest of these non-cons, and get in the league play as hot as anybody in the SEC. Regardless of that part of the conversation we just had, as far as when the game is called, we know one person that always makes it exciting. It's Derek Scott. The voice of the Gamecocks will be on the air at 6:30 alongside Casey Manning. You do a wonderful job, as we tell you oftentimes around here. So have a great game tonight, Derek. Can't wait to cut the radio on and listen to it. But most importantly from us, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and all of your family in West Virginia or wherever they may be this time of the year. But thanks for what you do for the Gamecocks. You're one of the best in the country, and we're really lucky to be able to cut the radio on from November until June and be able to listen to you call games. It sure is a pleasure, man. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it, guys. Merry Christmas to all of you as well. And if you're fortunate enough to be going to Orlando, drive safe and enjoy the trip.
We will.
Merry Christmas, Derek.
Merry Christmas, Derek.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
All right, guys.
Thanks, Derek. See ya.
See ya.
There you go. The great Derek Scott.